So before we jump into the topic all about surveys, really focusing on, I would say exit surveys mostly, can you give a little background of, who you are, what you do, your role?
Yeah, sure. So, Joe Federbush, president and chief strategist of Evolio Marketing. I founded Evolio Marketing back in like the end of 2015, um, which was pretty good. Before that, I was with a company called Exhibit Surveys for a really, really long time. Since then, they don't exist anymore, but they got purchased by Freeman. Anyway, so my overall experience with measurement in the event industry is over 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of a long time. It's been most of, if not all of my career. And Evolio survived the pandemic very well, fortunately, because we're a measurement company. And it didn't matter if it was online or in person. If anything, we sort of exploded during COVID because we were like the first to really measure, truly measure virtual events because like we never had more data, but no one knew what to
Mhm.
do with it. So we were like making sense of data storytelling. So that's my background. Yeah.
That makes sense. I was actually to say measuring a virtual event is like I wouldn't say the easiest thing in the world because, like you said, making sense. Like there's so much data. It's like, what do we do with it? But it's like
Yeah.
compared to in-person trade shows or events, it's like I got these lead scans, but what does that even mean? So no, that's really interesting. How did you get into just the survey business? Going back to like exhibits, how did you get into that in the first place?
um I was in high school and I literally lived next door to exhibit surveys. And I needed a summer job. And this is a long, long time ago before the internet. And I needed a summer job, and there was a mailroom and they were stuffing surveys into envelopes. And I literally started this whole journey of event industry and measurement by stuffing surveys into envelopes and then just escalated from there.
Nice. Old school. That actually reminds me like one of my first jobs. It was an internship in high school, also at a hockey rink in the city. And my
Nice.
job was to like stuff envelopes to make sure the captains knew that their first game was coming up. It's like there's got to be a better way, guys, like stuffing them. And there was the internet back then. It just wasn't super popular.
Yeah, all right.
What do you
Youngster.
remember the first event that you were stuffing envelopes for to send these surveys out?
There were shows that don't even exist anymore. But I could tell you some, and many do. That's the cool thing, right? So, I mean, I remember stuffing envelopes for like shows like PC Expo,
Hmm.
um, NECC, then some like National Computer Conference. But then others, like literally, this is like early 90s, like the National Restaurant
Oh,
Association
yeah.
shows, that are still around today and thriving, like FMI, the Food Marketing Institute,
Hmm.
um, Comdex, of course, CES. So like all these shows that have come and gone and survived.
That's pretty cool. We do quite a bit in the food business, so it's fun. That's pretty cool to know that that's kind of where you got started
Oh
back in the
yeah.
day.
IFT, FMI, Natural Products, East and West, all those, yeah.
Do you have a current favorite show that you're working with?
Totally. I have a few. Number one is the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, CattleCon. I love it. There's just like everywhere in the aisles are just meat, like samples of meat, beef.
That sounds pretty
Um,
awesome.
and then of course like CES, just because
Yeah.
it's CES. But there's like other ones globally. We do a lot of cool stuff with like gaming and esports events, and
Oh, very
and like
cool.
Comic Cons and stuff like that. So you just see like the other end of the spectrum compared to the B2B stuff.
No, I love that. Yeah, I used to love the video game world, and rest in peace to E3, but they ruined themselves.
I know that's a shame, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It was a good show
So
back in the day.
I couldn't believe the first time I went there. I'm like, how this is work? And I was like well out of college. This is several years out, and MC Squared's like, yeah, you can go there when I was, back there. And I was like, really? So I spent the first 2 days doing my job, and then the last day I'm like, I'm getting here early. I'm playing every video game that is in this place, and they're gonna have to walk me out of here, which essentially kind of happened. So, all right, well, let's get into the meat of it because as we can both see, we can talk. So, so I talk about surveys quite a bit. There's no better way to get the emotional feel of attendees at shows is by literally just getting the data directly from them. It's more than a badge scan where it's like, yeah, you get all the profile information, you can answer a couple questions, but What are some of the main reasons that exhibitors are using surveys?
I mean, a lot of what you just said. I mean, we you always hear about like VOC, voice of customer, a lot. We don't look at it that way. We look at it as more like VOV, voice of the visitor, or VOG, voice of the guest. Treat your visitors as a guest in your house. Once they step into your carpet, they should be treated like royalty. So, like, that's number one. I mean, the survey feedback, especially on site, you get that voice of the visitor, to your point, that goes beyond like rudimentary data or observational data, which is still important.
Hmm.
The real-time feedback is extremely useful because it allows you to course correct before it's too late. Like an on-site, I mean, like a post-event survey, it's not saying it's not valuable, it's extremely valuable, but it's after the fact,
Yeah.
right? And those are different objectives. I want information now and I want information later. They're two different, objectives. One of the big things, especially now, like back, we're so far back into face to face post COVID, but like what we found is that the data informs the staff and keeps them motivated, because some staff look at having to work a booth as punishment. Some booth staff look at having to work a booth as like, oh my God, I got the golden ticket, and
Hmm.
everywhere in between. So what we found is like we literally review certain KPIs and metrics with booth staff each morning before the show opens for a lot of our clients. And they are like thrilled to have that information, to be informed. And I mean, the other reason is, I would say the last reason is like, because post-event survey response rates are just so low,
Hmm.
that like if you're really wanting to get a good amount of like data, you really do need to do it on site. Mostly depending on your objectives, of course, but if you
Yeah.
want, true quantitative data, you're probably going to have to do it on site.
So I'm not the only one that gets the email that says, you have a chance to win, maybe win, but you're not going to, a $50 Amex gift card. So people don't respond to that. It's not just me. And
It's
oh,
yeah.
and those surveys will take at least 20 minutes of your time.
Well, I mean, there's that. There's the misleading. Are you really being, truly honest with your invitation? But just deliverability rates of
Yeah.
emails are garbage these days too. Even if you're DMARC approved and everything else, all the hurdles you have to go through to get an email to get through, it still could easily go to your other folder versus your targeted folder. So there's so many options, obstacles, I should say.
Yeah. So what are when you're on site, obviously we started talking about before we recorded, but what are the benefits? Now, are you always pairing entry surveys with exit surveys, and what are the benefits there to do that?
Yeah. We recommend it quite a bit and we do it quite a bit. So what we call is like, we call it either like unexposed, exposed, or pre-post, that kind of stuff. So surveying people with a screener question, have you visited the XYZ exhibit yet? Yes or
Hmm.
no. If they say no, then they're the unexposed or the pre, or the entry. And then, of course, an exit survey, which then asks those same questions, but then a whole lot more, about the experience and everything else. So, I mean, it's the best true research methodology to measure impact and change as a result of visiting, right? So it's, there's like pseudo pre-post, like where you can ask on an exit survey, hey, before you visited, what'd you think? Now that you visited, what do you think? So
Hmm.
because like adding like pre-post on-site surveys or entry and exit surveys, there's a lot more cost to that. Or they're,
Yeah.
so depending on the budget, the objectives, the need, etc. Um, but we do the entry, exit, pre-post, unexposed, exposed quite a bit.
How do you collect that data? Whether it's, it sounds like after the show or even before the show via email is like, well, first, let me ask, what would you say is like the average percentage rate of response on stuff like that?
Yeah, so online surveys, pre-event surveys is less than 5% typically. For
Yeah.
healthcare, it's even lower. For tech, it's like 7 to 10%. Manufacturing is about 5 to 7%. So it
So,
really, really varies by industry, but healthcare is by far the lowest response rate. On-site surveys, it's a participation rate. And we find that basically, I would say like 7 out of 10 people agree to participate in an exit survey.
Hmm.
Um, and there's factors that make that participation level so high. One
Hmm.
is using professional interviewers, not like creepers or, like low budget, or like a lot of the time we find like our clients will say, well, we have staff that could do that ourselves. And I'm like, okay. In addition to everything else they have to do,
Yeah.
so they're not really dedicated to it. Like we work with staffing agencies all over the world on a local basis so that we can, not have to pay for travel for local interviewers, but still get the best possible people who are professional, engaging. That's their job. Their job is to get a quota day
Hmm.
in, day out. It's not like, well, if I have time to do it, or nice to have versus need to have. So those are like, obviously offering an incentive like a gift card or stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it helps increase response rates, keeping the survey to a relatively short, and honest time frame, number of questions, less than 5 minutes, less than 20 questions, things like that.
Okay. What would you say, you kind of touched on this a little bit. What are some of the unique advantages of surveys, whether it's on-site or online?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this at HCA, but like our tagline, our registered trademark tagline is feelings aren't facts. And you know what I mean? And feelings are important and feelings are valid. But when you're talking with management, stakeholders, people who approve budgets, agency partners, whatever, to start a sentence with like, well, I feel like this show was good, or I feel like this show was bad because dot dot dot, versus 65% of our visitors are more likely to recommend our product as a result of visiting our booth, which has more stake in the game, right? Data.
Yeah.
So, being able to have true, valid data versus like rudimentary data or I feel like data gets you a lot further, especially with how budgets are and costs are and everything else. You know, Look, there's a lot of people in our industry like us who have been around a while, but times are changing. And we need data more than ever to support doing what we need to do, but
Hmm.
also to inform on like what is not working and what is working, because things that worked 5 years ago may not work today.
For sure. It's funny. I feel like I have that conversation at home a lot and definitely at work, but I won't talk about the work conversation. But with my kids, especially, it's like, your feelings are valid, but here are the facts. And
Yeah,
let's just focus on that. Like, I don't want to discount it. You obviously feel a certain way, but let's talk about like the actual situation. And
yeah,
yeah, it's true. It's like you need that information because otherwise it's like, but this is how I feel. It's like, I
yeah, yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah.
care.
And it's like, and I totally agree. I mean, and the thing is, like, there's so much importance with like going with your gut and like have the gut feeling and stuff like that's all valid, but it's
Yeah.
not. I wouldn't make $1 million decision on it. I would want to make $1 million decision on based on data,
Yeah.
or even $100,000 or even a $10 decision. I'd rather be informed with data than feelings,
Hmm. Yeah.
and
I
let
often,
it, yeah, let it
go ahead.
confirm your feeling.
Yeah.
That's cool. But yeah.
I do my own research, Joe, and that's how I come up with the feelings that I have. Is my own research. Sorry, that's kind of political, and I will not continue that down that line. So I already asked about average response rates, and obviously being in person, I think people are just non-confrontational, and that's just part of the reason that people are willing to say yes. But there are other ways to encourage attendees to respond, even if it is online. And I know those 5% and 7%, like that's
Yeah.
hurts my soul to hear that. Not surprising, but what are good ways to encourage people, whether it's online or in person, to respond to your survey?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is length, obviously. Don't make it too long and be very transparent. Hey, this survey will take 5 to 7 minutes to complete. Like what you said
Hmm.
before, like they say five, but it's 20. And like, that's not cool because then you're just going to get a lot of dropouts and you're going to get pissed people and it could impact your brand negatively. So yeah,
Yes.
the transparency for sure, respondent fatigue for sure,
Hmm.
offering an incentive when allowed for sure, but also it's like the what's in it for me. So if I'm answering your survey, what's in it for me? Like, is it because you're going to use this data to annoy me with sales and marketing and promotions? Or are you going to use this data to improve your products, to increase your customer satisfaction and your net promoter score? Like, what's in it for me? And I think that's a big part of the research, because we see so many research invitations are all about it, like the me being the client versus the you. And it should
Yeah.
always be about you, not me.
Yeah, no, that is right on the money. Um, Now I lost my train of thought because I was listening to that rather than looking at my questions. I should have been thinking about the next thing I was going to say. No,
I've
I'm just
got your
kidding.
questions up too, so I got your back here.
Those are just a guide. It's kind of like the
Ah,
speed limit. Ben works on them, I edit them, and then I just ignore them altogether sometimes. But no, just kidding. I always use Ben's questions since I know he's listening, and I never go off script ever.
Ben's
Um,
questions are the best questions.
obviously, and we can quote that in the article that'll be coming out next Friday. Um, do you think incentives work? I mean, because they don't work on me, especially if it like yeah, if it was like a 3-digit one, maybe. But I
Yeah,
also know the likelihood of me getting that 3-digit incentive is close to 0% every single time. Like, what do
right.
you think about incentives? How often do they work?
Yeah, so and it depends on the incentive, right? Because there's giveaways and there's drawings, right? Like, so give you an example. Like for a lot of the on-site surveys we do personally,
Hmm.
we give you a physical $10 Starbucks or Amazon gift card to every respondent that qualifies to complete a survey. So,
Okay.
but that's budget, that does cost
Yeah.
money, that's the problem. Versus to your point, like if you do a drawing, we're like, all right, complete a survey and be entered to win one of five $100 gift cards. Yeah, like it's a nice gesture. It's better than nothing, but it's
Is it?
not something. Yeah,
It sounds like
exactly.
it's
Is it
still
though?
nothing.
Is it though? Right. I mean, and like that's the thing, feelings versus facts. Like, some people are like, oh, I'll never win. And some people are like, I always win. So for whatever it's worth.
Yeah.
But like that's the thing. Even like with online surveys, we have a system where every respondent can get an e-gift card, not a
Hmm.
drawing, but so it's like just like you'd get a physical gift card for the on-site survey, you could get an emailed e-gift card for completing the survey, and it's all instantaneous, right? It's all opt-in and blah blah blah. But like um incentives help, but
Yeah.
you look at like healthcare, you look at like military, government, defense. You look at certain countries like Brazil, you cannot offer gifts.
Oh, interesting. I
Period.
didn't know about that
Yeah,
about
it's
Brazil.
just the law.
Yeah.
It's considered a bribe or the Sunshine Act or like whatever. So we do plenty of surveys in Brazil. We do plenty of surveys in healthcare, as you know, and we do a good amount in defense, military, and all that. And people still participate in surveys. That's where like on site is pretty much the requirement,
Yeah. That makes
because
sense.
doctors are not filling out an online survey very often.
No, they don't
Military,
check email.
government, defense, your email's probably not even getting through to them, you know. And if you're doing international, just be like conscious of like translations and correct
Hmm.
translations, and don't, even though most of the world does speak English to some degree, don't just assume, oh, I'm going to do it in English and screw you.
Yeah. I mean, for me, honestly, and here's some research for you. It's amount of time. Like, I don't care. Like, I actually like filling out surveys because I think karmically, it's nice to like do those things. But if you're telling me up front it's gonna be 10 to 15 minutes, like the likelihood of me clicking on that is close to zero, which makes sense for the 5%. But it's like
Yeah,
if you're like, hey, this is 3 to 5 minutes, it's this amount of questions. I'll dive right in. And I think saying how many questions it is, and I'm sure you know this, but it's like for me personally, it's like that is really helpful because it's like, yeah, I don't mind. It's like this is taking me 3 minutes of my day. Like I'll make time. Like I won't play one game on my phone in that 3 to 5 minute break that I was going to play, and I'll just answer this survey.
right.
Because it's a great way. It's like if I'm a customer of something, I definitely want them to have that feedback.
Yeah. Well, and that's a huge point too. I mean, Jay, because like if you get an unsolicited survey about something you don't give a shit about, you're not going to answer the survey. But to your point, like if you're a customer, whether you're a pissed customer or a happy customer, or in our world of events, we're a little spoiled because like it's an event. You took the time and money to attend. So
Hmm.
there's a little bit more of a vested interest to complete the survey than there
Yeah.
is if like someone hits you up about something that you have no idea what the hell they're talking about. So even that 5 to 7% response rate, which is low, it could be lower
Yeah.
when it's an
Yeah.
unsolicited survey. And that's where like sample size comes into play. And like another thing with post-event surveys is like if you're sending it to their badge scans, or the word leads loosely, if you don't have like 1,000 badge scans, you're really not getting many surveys back. And
Yeah.
even with 1,000 badge scans, 10% would be 100 surveys. And
Yeah. That's not
10% is a
nothing for
pretty
sure.
high response rate.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it, well, double in a lot of cases. And also, and speaking to my own personal experience, it's like I'll fill out a survey if I'm mad about something.
Hmm.
United
We get
Airlines
that a
has gotten
lot.
probably more survey responses for me than any other company out there.
Well, and we get that a lot with as like an objection to the only people who complete surveys are really pissed or really happy. That's like a thing we hear quite a bit. And that's sort of true about customer satisfaction surveys.
Yeah,
We're not doing, I mean, we do customer sat surveys, but the majority of the exit surveys that we're doing, they're not customer sat surveys.
that
That's a
makes sense.
specific type of research.
Yeah.
So they're visitor experience surveys. And like, whether you had a good, neutral, or positive experience, we're collecting a random sample of enough visitors exiting the booth to minimize that bias as much as possible.
No, that makes sense. All right.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go back to Ben's questions and start asking those. So, all right. So we're designing, like, what is the average length of an entry or an exit survey in terms of questions and timing?
Yeah, entry surveys are clearly shorter because they're a subset of the exit survey, right?
Hmm.
So with entry surveys or the pre or the unexposed or whatever, we recommend like literally like 5 to 10 questions and like really focused on like sentiment or agreement with like messages about that brand. Net promoter score is always a good one.
Hmm.
Awareness of products and maybe propensity to buy those products. And then, of course, a few demographics for classification. So those are objectives, right? I want to know how you perceive my brand, awareness of my brand, um, loyalty to my brand, buy my brand, and who are you, right? Those are like the
Hmm.
core questions. So that should take less than 5 minutes. Those are very simple questions. There's very few like open ends or, thought
Yeah.
provoking things, right? It's very direct. Then the exit survey, again, about maybe 3 to 5. I mean, it's going to be probably no less than 5 minutes,
Okay.
maybe like 5 to 7 minutes, because you're asking those same exact questions because you want to measure the change between pre and
Hmm.
post. But then you want to ask questions about their experience. Where did you go? Value of information received. Did you speak with staff? How helpful and knowledgeable and accessible were the staff? um, those additional questions are typically the ones that get then added to the exit survey. So you're
Okay.
measuring brand impact, you're measuring sentiment, you're measuring profile, and then you're also then measuring the experience, the usefulness of information, and how helpful the staff was.
And yeah, no, that I mean, that sounds like the perfect stuff to come out of a survey. It's all the emotional responses you can get from people. And as part of what you were saying, you said it'll be no less than 5 minutes. What would you say is like the max time you would make one of these?
Oh God. It depends again on the audience. So in gaming and
Of
esports, we
course.
have this like, and we've been doing it for
12
years.
seconds.
No, it's like 12 minutes. It's like
Really?
crazy. These
Huh.
people at gaming and esports events, they are like, yeah, let me tell you everything I want to tell you. And we
Fair.
give them like nice swag. They love
Yeah.
swag versus gift cards. Um, but like, yeah, it depends on the audience. Healthcare, keep it short. Military
Hmm.
defense, keep it even shorter. Um, tech, manufacturing, 5, 7 minutes is fine. 20 questions. Gaming, esports. If you're asking them questions about what they like to do and what they like to play and how they like to play and what devices they like to play on, they are all about it.
I get that. I'm a
Yeah,
self-proclaimed gaming dork, so yeah, no, I can see that.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. What would you say, when you're collecting the data and you're doing the surveys, and I'm just going to focus on on-site versus online because obviously there's a less effective, but what would you say are the best formats when you're in person to collect this data?
Like on like what kind of device or how?
Yeah,
Or
whether it's like paper or it's digital, are you doing it? Are you asking them the questions and answering it for them? What's
oh,
the best way?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's a great question. So if you're doing it on paper, what the hell is wrong with you? There's something called iPads and tablets and smartphones and things with screens. I have seen paper surveys recently still, and I'm like, I think you're garbage. Like I mean, I get it if it's like three questions, like rate
Right.
this, like fine, whatever. Like, do you need all the tech for that? But when it's like a legitimate survey, like, come on, put a little effort into it with the amount of survey tools and devices, but even QR codes. Like we
Yeah.
do a lot now with like scan the QR code, answer the survey on the phone, show me you've completed it, get a gift. It's that simple. So it's more self-administered. What we
Hmm.
find with self-administered is they have a larger margin of error because you have to look at like response duration and like we cut out we delete so much survey data on
Hmm.
self-administered because they're like tap 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 give me my gift. um, they're not accurately doing the survey, which to your point, how do we do it otherwise? We normally pre-COVID, we definitely did it as a personal interview where the interviewer would show them the tablet and they do it like ask you the question, you can answer it as a conversation. But getting that close to people's faces is kind of gross these days. So we do
It was
hand them
gross in all days. It was just acceptable.
it's just more gross now. Yeah, exactly. It's like VR headsets, like, ew.
Yes.
Unless there's like a giant alcohol wipe being in front of me, like that I can do myself. No thanks. But but yeah, so now we do it more like where we hand them the tablet
Hmm.
and we kind of like follow along and we interject. Oh, that question, to definitely take your time to read that carefully. It's a little long, we know. So just be like empathetic and personable as people are answering it themselves
Hmm.
so that it's going to be highly accurate quality data.
That makes a lot of sense. Can
Yeah.
you All right, so now like once you have all the data, you get 8 million surveys, 70% response rate, obviously. What do you do with the data? Now, are you helping analyze the data? Are you often giving it to the event and trade show manager and then how does that work in terms of the analyzing?
Yeah, I mean, for our business, we do everything. We analyze it, segmentation analysis, stat test it, summary data, online dashboard data, detailed PowerPoint report, review it together once it's all complete. But the
Hmm.
biggest value of like the on-site survey, when I alluded to this earlier, is like we literally at the end of the day we don't give you like give our clients a data dump or anything. We go through the data and we'll make it look pretty and nice and simple, super simple. What are the key metrics and like three or four key bullet points about what's working well, what you need to do better tomorrow. So it's actionable, real-time data
Hmm.
that, and then, like I said too, we normally will work with the booth staff to let them know, hey, this message isn't being communicated very well, and this is really important to the success of this program. So
Hmm.
do me a favor. Let's work this into the conversation in a natural, organic way to make sure you're saying this because it supports your demo, it supports the graphics behind you, it supports the pre-show communications. It's a cohesive message delivery thing. So there is that like summary data that's real time daily, but then there's a detailed analysis with very specific recommendations and comparisons to the benchmarks, as you saw at HCA,
Hmm.
that we share with after the fact as well.
No, I mean that is why more people. I know it's hard because you can't always fit it in the budget, but it's such valuable information. It's like you're spending six figures on a booth. Like this sounds like it should be a mandatory add-on to it. Not even I shouldn't even say an add-on, just
Yeah.
included within what you're doing.
I mean, what we find, honestly, what our clients tell us, we're preaching it, don't get me wrong, but it's based on data, not feelings, is that the most successful companies who are measuring effectively, they're not spending more than 5% of their budget to measure.
Yeah.
Like that's what they're investing. So basically, they'll if it's $100,000, they're going to say, okay, we could take. Well, if it's a smaller budget like that, it's more like 7%. But the point is, we'll invest $7,000. You know what I mean? Like to measure the other $93,000 we're spending at the show.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense. It's funny. Totally forgetting his name. You ever see Chris Walker on LinkedIn? He's a big B2B tech guy and talks all about measurement also, but he's like, you're spending 100 million, let's say $100 million on like digital ad spend, and you don't want to measure it? Like what? Yeah, but even like $100,000, it's like, don't you want to know that you're doing it right? And yes,
Yeah,
you can go with your gut feel. I'm a big gut feeling guy, but I also
yeah,
like to know for sure that like after 20 years, I trust my gut, you know?
right,
But it's like
right.
those first few times, it's like, let's really measure this. And then, hey, you want to take a break? Your prerogative. Don't recommend it. But yeah, no, it'll never make sense to me.
Yeah. But I mean, and like some executives don't give a shit about your gut. They want
Yeah.
data. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that's the bottom
Especially
line.
in healthcare and the military defense and in tech, they're very big on the data. Like that is, so yeah,
Yeah.
that
Well,
makes,
and when you look at certain tech companies' stock prices lately, they're even being more scrutinized to have data and not
oh yeah.
feelings. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the growth at all costs, that era of SaaS is in the rear view, at least for now. I'm sure it'll come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll close out this portion on this last question. Are there any examples you can share that where surveys just like led to a really meaningful change where it's like, wow, we were so wrong with our feelings on this one?
Oh God, countless. So give you one was there was a show in the US. It was an international company, and the message was not translating well
Hmm,
to Americans. And this happens even more so the other way around.
I'm
But
sure.
but the point is like so we found out like the message agreement scores and sentiment scores were pretty low on day one. So we said, oh, you know what? Let's kind of like let's adjust this because your message is important. It's just not clear. So we kind of like changed the way to speak to Americans.
Hmm.
And again, you could do it the other way, just to, more importantly. Um, and the conversation, the tone and the tone of the conversation changed. And then when we looked at day two's results, the sentiment for those products and that brand had significantly increased. So that wasn't like a product issue, it was a staff and messaging issue. Another really good example was this was CES. This was one of the biggest exhibits at CES, which we know there's many of, and you're fighting for time and attention. There was one demo that our client thought was the freaking coolest thing in the entire world. Um, it didn't land well because it was it was not in a good booth location, so people just didn't see it. Now you can't change that on the fly. So
Hmm.
what they did was they kind of like pivoted their brand ambassadors to be a little more front and center to engage and then take people back there so that they were like, oh my God, this is so freaking cool. So there was almost like a sense of like, oh, I got invited to the secret club and they
Yeah.
made the best out of it. And it was like, if they didn't have the data to say, like, they could look at it and say, well, traffic's light. But when we were doing the exit surveys and we're like, did you visit any of these areas? People were like, what the hell is that? I didn't even see it. And it sounds pretty freaking cool.
Hmm.
So that was two great examples of like, but you'll know what the one of the things that's consistent about those examples is it comes down to the staff. It's
Yeah.
because it's the in-person aspect.
Well, that'll, I know Ben's not on camera now, but I know he's smiling because we've covered like hiring staff versus training staff. And it's like, that's a make or break, that another area that people don't focus on enough. It's like, hey, you can drop your people in the booth, but to what you were saying earlier, Joe, it's like, if they don't want to be there, it's going to be miserable. Like, you want the people that think it's a reward to be on site, not the people like, oh God, can you believe it? I have to travel to this show and spend this time, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not surprising. And especially at CES, where it's like time and attention is like impossible to come by unless you're, obviously an Intel or a Samsung or